So, to be very honest, the way I started film photography is when I began photography, there was no digital photography. Yeah, so that dates me. So when I was a teenager, I started making pictures with a film camera. Like that's all there was. And it was at still an amazing time for photography, for film photography. It was the late 70s, so the kind of photography that was being made in the world was with film it really influenced me. I became a photographer because randomly at first I just picked it up as a student because I had to fulfill the requirements. I didn't think, I wasn't particularly interested in it. And it wasn't until maybe I had done it for a year that it really became a passion for me, because it was seeing the works of other photographers. At that time it was particularly Diane Arbus, who's a film photographer from the 70s is when she finished her work, and Cartier-Bresson were the biggest influences on me. So that's how I started. Hi, my name is Jenny Edwards-Bear. I'm faculty at RISD, part-time faculty, and I want to thank you, Lorna, for giving me the opportunity to talk with you about photography, and about film photography in particular. I still look at those materials, and I still look at those works and find them completely relevant and influential. Now in particular, the work that I always come back to is a sequence from even before then, from the 1950s, a sequence by Robert Frank and the Americans. Mm-hmm. It's a book. Well, by the time I was a graduate student, that world was starting to evolve, and I became really interested in it. But digital cameras weren't a thing, but it was more in post-production. But still, I didn't even practice it then. It was still really new. I feel like the whole medium really became reinvented around the turn of the century. Really, to me, really reinvented. But still, even though I had an interest, especially in what could happen with printing, I was very late to adapt at all to the world of digital. Okay, so why is film photography important, or what's the purpose? The purpose, you said.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of film photography, even though now we live in a digital world where digital is so convenient? For me, it's twofold. For me, there are things that happen with the materials of film and film cameras that could only happen with those mechanisms, with the automatic nature of those cameras and the physical process of film going through it. The project that we were looking at before, the Romani families, is an example of that. Like that kind of language, the techniques that were used, where there's very saturated colors and blur, happened because of trying to really understand the camera and the lighting I was using. And I wound up grossly overexposing the film with flash, but also grossly overdeveloping it by hand. So it made those kind of saturated colors. And for me, it was like the beginning, like finding like those like things that went wrong. At first I couldn't even print it. The negatives were so overexposed, like things that, but in the darkroom, you can make something of that. In digital, you can't. And that kind of an accident would blow out, like you couldn't get information. But some of those prints, I would just be printing for like a minute, like in the darkroom, to try to get something to come out. So it was just having it's both like the limitations of the material, but what the material does well. Like film still has like some flexibility with making errors. And sometimes, to me, what I love so much about photography, in particular 35mm film photography, are some of the accidents that can happen with the process, and then trying to understand those accidents, and then trying to make it a part of your own language of photography.